Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Bobby Tonelli with Tech360.tv, and we're back with our full review of the Nikon Z7. Now, a lot of you have watched our first impressions. If you haven't already, please do so. Click on the link below. And a lot of you left comments asking questions, how it related to the A7R III, what was the feeling like, what was it like in low light, and we're gonna answer all those questions for you and more. Okay, so let's get down to it. Let's talk about the Nikon Z7. First and foremost, let's talk about the design of this camera. In terms of the cameras, if we're gonna compare from the A7R III and the Canon EOS R, the Nikon Z7 is the smallest and the most ergonomical in my opinion. When I first talked about the camera, I mentioned about the pinky tip falling off at the bottom, but I was really kind of holding it like this, but you actually hold the camera a little bit higher on the grip. And when you do that, you do notice that your hands grip very well on this, and it feels very, very good in the hands. It has a slightly slimmer profile than the A7R III, and you can see that the eyepiece actually juts out a little bit, so your nose, depending on how long your nose is, doesn't hit the screen when you're looking at it. Moving on to this, you have this OLED display here, which is great because it shows you a lot of your information. You do have the articulating screen, which does come in handy sometimes, doesn't swivel out. Nikon didn't go swivel, okay, not a big deal, but there you have it. Buttons on the back are pretty understandable to get used to. I mean, of course you have information. This is your joystick. I do wish it had touchscreen to touch to focus on the screen. It doesn't, you have to use the joystick. And you sort of do confuse that button with the AF on button right there since they're very close together. It's pretty overall user-friendly, and it does feel really good in the hands in terms of getting used to the controls minus that joystick. Okay, let's get into the specs of this camera. Now, the Z7 is a 45.7 megapixel full-frame censored camera. It has 5-axis image stabilization on the sensor, and it is ISO from 64 to 25,600 on that. I gotta tell you, in terms of the specs inside of this, it's impressive. And I have to say that the image quality out of this camera is really, really good. Now, one challenge I wanted to do with this camera was take it to a boxing match. Of course, this is indoor, low light, and I had with me the Sony A7R III with this 24-70, but it's a 2.8, the G Master lens versus the 24-70 f4 lens on the Nikon Z7, and I want to see how they work. Now, I wasn't able to get under the ropes like a lot of photographers do to get the really good boxing shots like the above and get the really close up. So I had to deal with focusing in between ropes, which is challenging with the camera because when you're on autofocus, it's going to focus on the subject that's closest to you, which is the ropes versus the boxer. So it really was about moving the focus points around, trying to follow the boxers and get the shots that I wanted. And for the most part, both cameras were struggling with this. Not one was really doing better than the other. I got better shots sometimes with a Nikon, better shots with a Sony, but a lot of it was luck, to be honest with you. I will say this, in that lighting condition, the Sony was a flatter image in terms of color. The Nikon at RAW was a much more colorful image as I was seeing it in real life. So in terms of color accuracy, I'll give it to the Nikon, but you have a flatter profile on the Sony in RAW, so you can adjust your colors more depending on how you want to edit it. So to each their own on that. Now let's talk about shutter speed for a moment here, because I've tested this out in a wide variety of different shutter speeds. Now, in my initial first impressions, I noticed some blackout, right? Very minimal, but I noticed some blackout. However, there's something that I found out about this as I was shooting along with it, especially in the high continuous extended shutter speed. It's 9 frames per second, and there's 0 blackout. It's good. Now, 9 frames per second isn't the fastest on the market, but it's plenty for most people out there, honestly. You're not gonna have an issue capturing fast-moving subjects at all. Okay, so there's for the shutter speed. Now let's talk about the focus points on this. Now there's 493 focus points on this camera, which is pretty impressive. And one thing that I noticed what Nikon has done with it is that the focus point, let's say a single focus point in terms of a green box or red box that you're looking at, is smaller than say a standard focus point on a Sony or other cameras. What this allows is finer adjustments on the focus points where you want it to be focused on. This is why I felt Nikon should have included touchscreen focus on this instead of using the joystick, because with such a small focus point, that joystick, you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing left, right, up, down a lot, versus using a swipe on the touchscreen to kind of get to where you wanted to go. So, but I have to say that you can really nail down focus very well on this camera. Now, speaking of that, is it as fast at focusing as the Sony? I'm going to say they're very close to each other, but I will give it to Sony for maybe a millisecond or so faster than the Nikon. Speaking of that though, now we have to talk about something different that the Z7 has that the Sony doesn't, and that is of course using legacy lenses. Now when focusing, let's say I'm putting on the 85 1.4. Now this is the Nikon adapter that's on it, that's why it's a little bit larger. When I put it onto this camera and I'm doing autofocus, you will notice that with legacy lenses, now I haven't tested all of them, so I cannot say that this is gonna happen with all of them, but with this 85 1.4G Nikkor lens, you're going to notice that focusing is maybe a millisecond slower than it is with the S-line lenses here. So I do want to point that out to you on that. So let's talk about 4K video recording, because everyone's talking about 4K recording on these mirrorless cameras, right? Full frame, 4K up to 30 frames per second on it. If recording internally, it's 8-bit at 420. If recording out, it's 10-bit at 422. Now, I shot a video recently using this camera, driving in a car. I was not shooting it, my friend was shooting me in the car, shaving, and the image stabilization and the color quality is fantastic. What you're seeing is raw out of the camera. There was no adjusting done on color profiles or anything. This was just out of the camera. So if you were looking for a mirrorless camera to do 4K recording and you thought maybe Sony was the only one that could do it, Nikon's challenging them on that front, okay? And they've done a good job with it. So no issues at all with the 4K recording, okay? Let's talk about the UI for a moment, because UI is very important with all these cameras. UI can make or break a user experience. Now, I've always been pretty critical of Sony. My favorite UI of all the cameras that I've used to date is the Hasselblad X1D, by the way. Leica comes in a very close second to that. But Sony's always been pretty tough to navigate through. I can say that Nikon's UI is easier than Sony's, but there are some hiccups in terms of how some things you have to use the menu system to adjust, whereas Sony you can adjust without the menu system and vice versa. So, but I will say that I would give it in terms of just browsing through the menu system and understanding where everything is at. I would give the edge to Nikon over Sony, but it is what it is. Now let's talk about the lenses. Now, what I have on here right now is the 2470 f4 S-line lens from Nikon. This is the new lens lineup they have. 55 diameter that fits the new mount to the Z7 and the Z6. And this is a bigger diameter mount than it is on the previous generation of Nikon lenses, hence that's why they needed an adapter. Now this lens is a high quality lens, okay? Now, as you can tell, this is the 2470. It looks pretty compact, but what Nikon's done, which I like what they did with this, is they've created a lock. So when you unlock it, now it gets to the 24. So as you can see, that is locked and closed. You turn the lens, unlocks it, and you get a little bit more of an extension. That's 24, this is 70. So it does get much longer, but it's a much more narrower barrel right there. So it's easier to balance, easier to hold. It doesn't look so clunky. It's less weight to carry around. So I commend Nikon on that. And the image quality on this lens, on all these lenses, the 35 1.8 and the 2470, it's impressive. There's no chromatic aberration I'm finding. There's no distortion in the corners. But now let's talk about how it compares to, let's say, the 85 1.4, which is a legacy lens, to this. Okay, this lens is designed for high resolving power to take advantage of the 45.7 megapixel sensor on this. This lens is not. And you notice it right away in terms of the images. I took a picture of my road bike outside and I wanted to see how it looks. The 85 1.4, you're gonna get a beautiful bokeh. I mean, it just melts in the background, right? But you're noticing a lot of purple fringing, a lot of blue edges on the contrasting and the green edges and so forth. And the detail, the sharpness is a lot less than the 35 1.8 and the 2470. It's a lot less. So I will say this for those of you who have Nikon legacy lenses out there and you want to use it with this camera. Now, if it's a newer lens that was designed to kind of go with the D850, the D750, you will be okay. If you're using something like the 85 1.4G Nikkor lens or something older than this, you might find that your images are a little bit soft. And it's just because these lenses were designed for cameras at a time at a certain megapixel range. And these lenses are now designed to maximize and go above and beyond 45.7 megapixels, okay? So keep that in mind. These lenses are that good. Now let's talk about the EVF on this, because this is the 3.69 million dot EVF. I mean, that's pretty much the standard. I think the top of the line right now is the Leica SL. This is not that level, but it's close to it. What you're looking through the viewfinder is beautiful, it's clear, it's sharp, it's accurate in terms of what your images are, what your colors are seeing in terms of exposure, everything else, no issues at all. You can review images in the viewfinder, you can see your menu system in there. It is a very good viewfinder. And the nice thing I like about it, as I mentioned before, is that it jets out a little bit. So if I put up to my face here, my nose is not hitting the screen, right? Now on the Sony, because it's very flat to the screen, my nose is on the screen. This I can really get in close on it, and I can pretty much get without any sort of light interference on that. So I do commend Nikon on that. They did a great job in the EVF. Let's talk about the card slot for a moment, because here's the thing about these cameras. Not everyone that buys a Nikon Z7 or a D850 is a professional photographer. A lot of people that are buying these cameras are hobbyists. They want a good quality camera that's gonna last them for a few years. They want a camera that's gonna have high megapixels. I bet you, if you look at the numbers, majority of people buying cameras today are not professionals. So, having said that, does a hobbyist need 2 card slots? The answer is no, they don't. Is it nice to have? Sure. Does it limit a professional using this? No, because a professional is gonna have more than one camera on them anyway. So, I will say this, for those out there complaining about the card slot, chill out, relax. Let's give the XQD card a chance. Let's give Nikon a chance at this camera. It's not a deal breaker to have 1 card slot, because anyway, these cards are more expensive and you're gonna have to upgrade into that system anyway. It's gonna be an investment, so let's not worry about 2 of them, okay? All right, good. Now let's talk pricing here. I've got the prices as of today, October 1st, as of recording this video. Now, these are gonna be the manufacturer suggested retail pricing. Now, there might be promotions in your respective camera shops, but here they are in Singapore dollars, okay? For the Z7 with the FTZ adapter, so you can mount your legacy lenses on it, it's 5,149 Singapore dollars, okay? Now, with the Z7 and the 2470 f4 lens without the adapter, you're looking at 5,799 Singapore dollars. Now, if you want the entire kit, lens, camera, and the FTZ adapter, you're looking at 6,049 Singapore dollars. But besides that, I'm gonna talk about my overall conclusion on this camera. The Nikon Z7 is a formidable player in the mirrorless game. Now, people were saying, well, it has this, it doesn't have this, it's a Sony. They're comparing spec to spec. Put the specs aside, this camera performs very well. The color that comes out of the images as a raw file is impressive. The speed of the camera, 9 frames per second, is not bad at all. Now, it's not the fastest out there, but it's 45.7 megapixels too. A lot of megapixels on a sensor means that it's going to be slower when you're shooting higher speed. ISO 25,600. Yes. Is it the highest? No, but you're never gonna shoot at that level anyway. The images you're gonna take out of this camera, I have shown these images to people and they were blown away by the quality of the images, okay? This camera is a great camera. I'm not gonna tell you which is better because I don't believe in that, because everyone has their own preference out there in terms of cameras. You might like the Canon system better. You might have a bunch of Canon lenses and you might like just the color of Canon better. That's your prerogative. You might like Sony better. There's nothing wrong with that. Sony makes a fantastic camera. But I will tell you this, using the Nikon, I would recommend it. You're looking for a mirrorless camera, a full frame mirrorless camera out there, and you're looking for something with high megapixels that's going to be future-proof, that you're gonna be able to adapt lenses to this because you know the adapters are gonna be coming for this. It's got great ISO range, great image quality, great 4K. You can't go wrong with this camera at all. So that wraps up my thoughts on the Nikon Z7. By the way, for all those who are thinking that we're paid by Nikon to review this camera, we are not. You know who's sponsoring this video? Tech360. It's all on us, not on anybody else. Our thoughts and our thoughts only on it. Let me know your thoughts and comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. Until the next one, take care.